when he made his nomination for this week?
His name is Andy Clarke. He lives in Hardwick. Andy was always petrified about flying. You know, if he had to go abroad, he just couldn't cope with it. And in the end, he decided that the only way to get round this fear was to learn to fly. And he calls himself the Phobic flyer. And he actually live streams aircraft from Gloucester Airport.
Well, lots to talk about there, and Andy's here now. Hello.
Good morning.
Welcome
Afternoon,
along.
Sorry.
Yeah. And we've obviously been nominated by Andrew, so always nice to hear people say nice things about you as well.
He's a great chap, Andrew. Yeah, we've worked together when we set up 7FM a few years ago. But yeah, he's a great chap. Really nice guy.
Yeah, he likes a nice fry up as well. Organises plenty of those at the Breakfast Club, which sounds good. So he mentioned the Phobic flyer.
I am.
So I know a lot of people who don't like flying. Some of them don't like it, but they'll fly anyway, but come out in a cold sweat and grip your hand if you're sitting next to them. Yeah. Some people won't go anywhere near an airplane. So what was it like for you?
That was the first one for me. I mean, going on holiday, majority of you have to fly. 16, I went to, I think it was Crete or somewhere like that, Corfu. And we struggled to get down. There was significant rain and thunder. And I think on the fourth attempt we landed and I just was hysterical, basically. I just didn't like it at all. And I thought, I'm not doing this again.
And was that your first flight?
I think it was. It was my first commercial flight. Yeah, I think it would have been. Yeah, it was. Yeah, so that was a while ago.
Not a great introduction then, is it?
Not really, no, not at all.
Yeah, so they tried to land and they had to just go around again?
Yeah, go around. That's the technical
going around
term.
in circles?
Yeah, so there's a number of times they'll do it. And I think Corfu suffers with rain on the runway really badly. But I remember sitting next to a guy, my friend, who was going to comfort me, sort of thing, fell asleep when we were landing. And this guy sat next to me from Manchester. He was a car dealer. I specifically remember that. And he said, "Oh, don't worry, mate. We do this all the time. I do this 5-6 times a year. It's fine." And then he said those words, "I don't like this."
No.
Yeah. Oh. And at that point, I thought, yeah, we're all going to die. We're all going to die. It's like aeroplanes.
So the man who is super confident and has done it a lot. Yeah. And then when you see someone like that get nervous.
Absolutely. So I woke my friend up and said, wake up. And we got down in the end. And I just thought I spent the whole week worrying about the flight back, which is not good.
Which is the problem. Because I've been with people also. I went on holiday years ago with a friend to Mallorca who does not like flying. And this was the one who was gripping my hand the whole time, so nervous. The problem is, when we were there, all he could think about was flying back again.
Exactly. That's what you do. Yeah. I can remember until recently, probably 10, 12 years ago, remembering sort of about a week before and then counting down. In 18's time, I'll already be there. I'll have done the flight and then, doing that. And it's irrational. You get people say, oh, if people wanted us to fly, God wanted us to fly, we'd have wings, but we need to fly. It's part of everyday life, isn't it?
So was it the takeoff, the landing, all of it? Which bit was it?
It was the thought of crashing was the real problem, to be honest. But it's quite irrational, flying is, you've got more chance of having an incident driving to the airport than you have flying. It's control. I'm an engineer by heart, so it's lack of control, not understanding how the plane works. How can you keep something that's so heavy in the air?
I have to say, I've done many flights, but once I was in Australia, in Melbourne, looking at the plane that was going to take me to London. Yeah. You have a bit of thinking time, don't you? And I was looking at this plane thinking, how is that going to get me to London? And when you start thinking about the fact that you don't really understand it all, then you can get a bit nervous. Absolutely. So it's best to think about something else.
Definitely. And I did the worst thing you can do, and it is really the worst thing to do, is to have a few drinks. That is the worst thing you can do before getting on a plane.
I imagine everything's heightened.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is.
Gosh. So not a great experience then. No. Hopefully you had a good holiday when you got there.
Yeah, it was good.
It's all right. Yeah. But you decided to do something about it. So a lot of people have tried various techniques. What did you do?
So I remember when I got married, my wife set up a bit of a treat for me to fly out of Staverton, and this would have been in 1997. And I hated every minute of it. And I can remember we took off, and I thought that feeling of sort of romantic feeling of being flying and being free, three-dimensional. And I got in the plane, and I can still remember it now, 100 feet above the runway. Hysterical. I just wanted to land. And, you go white, you go, what's the matter with you? You're quiet. You're going white. Are you okay? No, I want to land. And we sort of flew around for a bit and landed, and I thought, nah, not going to do that. And it wasn't until 2013 when I was working at EE as a contractor, and the guy that signed my timesheets had just started to learn to fly aeros in Cardiff, and he said, you should learn to fly.
And you were thinking, what a ridiculous idea.
Stupid, crazy man. But I thought, well, he's signing my timesheet, so I've got to... And he said, you can do it. And there was almost a little bit of pressure there. So I did exactly that.
So you didn't go on a course to ease people's concerns and fears. You decided you were actually going to fly planes.
Yeah.
That's the way to overcome the whole thing. Yeah.
It's rather extreme. And it did take me 7.5 years, but I did it, And now the fear... whilst I can understand why people are frightened, it does seem irrational to me, which is weird because I experienced it as well.
So is it about being in control? Now you are in control, you're driving the thing, and you're not relying on someone else to take off and land.
Definitely. I can remember on my skill test that we did with John Sorsby, who's our chief flying instructor, and he put me at ease. But I can remember after we'd done the majority of the flying, I think it's about 2 hours the skill test was, it was quite extreme. I can remember he said, right, you can have a rest now. I'll fly the aircraft. And as soon as I took my hands off the control, I felt sick. Really felt sick. And I got to the extent where I thought, I'm going to be sick. I put my hands back on the control and it disappeared instantly. So it's all about control with me.
That's very interesting because to find out in that way, because you might have booked yourself onto some sort of scared of flying course. There are things you can do, aren't there? To ease people's nerves, and I don't know, people probably go through meditation and things like that.
Yeah.
They try all sorts of things.
I did hypnosis. I did that.
That's another way of doing it.
Yeah, it did. I did that, and it did take the edge off. But again, the brain's an amazing thing where it can just see danger where there isn't danger. And
So you decided to tackle the problem head on, and now you are a pilot.
I am a pilot.
Looking back, you must have think, what a journey I've been on.
Yeah, it was. And I did stop and start a few times. And I think once you stop, it's quite hard to restart. And you think, well, I'm not going to do it. And then I missed it. And then I got my licence. So I started in 2013 in February, and I got my licence in September 2020. So quite a time.
What did the instructor say when you said, I'm terrified of even being in an aeroplane? Will you teach me to fly?
Yeah, we'll get you through that, Clarke. You'll be all right, he said. But I wasn't. And again, it wasn't until, I think, hour 10 when a guy called Jonathan Cantley, bless him, I said, I can't do this. I said, I want to land and I'm just not going to do it. And he just, you could see the perseverance. He went, just go with me. And I said, no, I want to land now. So he said, exactly, yeah, get me down. He took me up through to about 7,000 feet above the clouds. And I'm going goose pimply now. I can still remember it. And it was just an amazing experience, which we normally see when we go on holiday anywhere. We normally fly above the clouds. But it was just flying just above the clouds. And it was the deep blue sky, white clouds. And I thought, I want to do this. So he was right to do that. And if it wasn't for him, I probably would have given up, to be fair.
How interesting. What an interesting story of overcoming a fear of flying by learning to be a pilot.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Yes, love it. Andy's with us today on BBC Radio Gloucestershire for County Connections. Was nominated last time from Andrew, who was from Seven Vale Rotary. And we'll talk some more about that, the whole experience of learning to fly and where he might be flying to next. Andy's here on BBC Radio Gloucestershire. Nicky here through until 2. And it's County Connections. We're with Andy Clarke today, as you've heard. He's called himself the Phobic flyer. I didn't like flying, but now has become a pilot. We were just having what I would call quite a geeky conversation about maps. And the maps that you look at when you're a pilot. A friend of mine has learnt to fly, and he showed me, which is fascinating, the airspace around each airport.
Yeah.
How you have to keep calling the people in charge of each airport and say, may I fly through your airspace? You might get a yes, might get a look, there's lots of easy jets coming in, please stay away. And I find it really interesting. You have to sort of plot your journey through all these different airspaces.
Yeah, I find that quite daunting, actually. It's moving maps for me is very important to have. So in other words, sat nav in a plane, if you like. I find that really, really important because you can see dynamically where you are and what you're near. And I do find I try and keep away from airspace, and I shouldn't really, because I should be confident now to fly through things like Bristol airspace. They won't always give you a clearance to transit their airspace. Bryce Norton I've been through, actually, and that's quite cool, seeing all those big planes on the ground.
Yeah.
And Fairford.
I was talking to my friend about it, just saying, well, they've got all these scheduled flights with passengers who've paid a lot of money to arrive on time at an airport.
Absolutely.
And here are you in a little plane, just going on a little trip around the UK, having a nice time.
Yeah.
Of course they're going to say no. They've got to get their planes landed on time.
Exactly. And that...
Don't get in our way.
Exactly. I landed at Bristol Airport a few years ago. I delivered a plane from our flying club, Bristol Aero Club, and I can remember being on quite a long final. In other words, the runway's in front of you can see it, and you're coming into land, and it was an EasyJet plane called for departure, ready for departure, and you could hear the frustration in the controller's voice when he said, I'll get to you as soon as I can. I've got a PA-28 on a 5-mile final. Stand by. But that put pressure on me.
Your holiday makers can wait.
Yeah, but that put pressure on me because I'm thinking, I can remember coming into land thinking they're all going to be like putting their fists up at me,
looking at their watch.
Exactly.
Come on,
but it costs them money. It costs the airlines. Exactly. They've got slots from where all the way through to the sort of destination airspace. That costs money if you get delayed.
And there you or someone else comes along and says, 5-mile trip here, just a little pleasure trip. May I come through? Oh, right, okay, you've got a problem with that. Yeah.
Exactly.
So where do you normally fly? Because you've got to keep the hours up. Once you've got these skills, you've got to keep going, haven't you?
You've got to be current, so you have to fly. Now I've done over 50 hours P1, which is in charge of the aircraft. I'm flying on my own, so to speak. I have to fly once every 2 months, one takeoff and landing every 2 months with Bristol Aero Club. That's their rules. But to carry passengers, you have to do 3 takeoff and landings every 3 months. The problem is flying is expensive, very expensive, and therefore I tend to only fly when I need to, which is not right. I've recently started doing some tail wheel experience with farm strip flying, and this Darren, a friend of mine, got me into that, and that's cheaper to do, and it's a different experience altogether.
And this is where the wheel is on the tail of the aeroplane rather than the front.
The nose wheel, and there's lots of farm strips around. I mean, I didn't realise I'd flown over these airstrips here. Didn't know they were there. Loads of them around this area.
Very interesting. Yeah, different skills there.
Absolutely,
I think, as well. So as well as this, you clearly love aviation now after being scared of it.
I do.
Love what you're doing. And you actually, people might have heard of what's called Big Jet TV.
Yes.
Someone else who sort of goes around airports and films takeoffs and landings, and you do something similar in Gloucestershire.
I do small jet TV. No,
small
it's not
jet TV.
So I realised that no one was sort of streaming general aviation, or GA as it's called, in the UK really, and specifically, I don't think there's a pilot streaming at all. I may be wrong. So I thought I'm going to put those two things together, my technical background, and I've built a mobile studio. It's not as nice as this studio. And we tow it around. We're going to Shobden next weekend for their Airfest 25. But we tend to stream at least one day each weekend from Gloucester Airport, weather permitting. And that's sort of streaming the general comings and goings of the aircraft, fixed wing and rotary, so helicopters and planes.
There'll be plenty of people who love this.
Absolutely.
A lot of people love, aviation, but also transport in general,
Absolutely.
And just to have that camera trained on what's going on at the airport.
Yeah, we've got 3 cameras. We've got one on the roof, an automatic one. I've got a couple of cameramen, and we get people in and interview them as well. So, it's good fun. It's good fun.
And do you get much of a reaction from people who are watching?
Yeah, we've done a little thing now where we're using AI to create jingles.
Are you?
And it's bizarre because we've now got jingles for every different type of phase, different phase of the landing or takeoff, go around or backtrack and things like that. And it's becoming a little bit of a niche that no one else is doing. So it's good fun.
So Big Jet TV is not doing that.
No, it's not.
But it does sound like a lot of fun.
It is fun.
And
it is fun.
Do you take passengers? Are you kind of happy sort of up there on your own, or do you have someone alongside you?
Do you know, it's always nice to take a passenger. It becomes a little, I wouldn't say boring, but it's nice to have someone to talk to and say, well, we'll fly over your house or we'll do something like that. So, I enjoy taking people up in the air. It's great fun.
Yeah. And all nerves have gone now after what you went through before.
Do you know what? It's funny you say that. So, all nerves are gone generally. Last night, I did some tailwheel flying in a Piper J3 Cub, which was built 81 years ago, which is amazing with farm strip flying. And we took off and we were about 1,500 feet. And I realised he still had the door and the flap down.
Oh.
Which is fine because that's what these sort of vintage aircraft do. And he said, "Are you okay with the door open?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay."
This is not a parachute jump.
But I did, I did have that feeling, and I thought back to how I felt when I started to fly. And he said, "Look, if you're daunted, we'll put it up because it can be quite daunting." And he then closed the sort of door that comes down to itself, and I felt better.
Good, glad about that. Now, it's time to nominate who's coming in next time, because it's a radio relay, of course.
It is a radio relay.
Scoured your address book. Who are you choosing?
I'm choosing Mr. Darren Lewington. Darren is... he's an aviation legend, to be fair. He used to run Gloucester Airport. He used to run the ATC as well. He teaches air traffic controllers to do air traffic controlling, if that's a thing. He teaches that at Global at Gloucester Airport. He's an instructor, and he runs a unique company called Aerotiques that makes aircraft parts into furniture and other things as well. So he's a great guy, and he's been really supportive of me and my channel as well.
Brilliant. We'll meet him next time, and lots to talk about there as well. Well, I presume you arrived, by car or plane today?
Helicopter. No, I did drive.
Aviation in the car park. But good to see you.
Thank you.
And interesting to hear all about it.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. So we'll meet Darren next time.